So Jacquelyn, retail media sometimes feels like it came out of nowhere, but you've been in the business for a while. Can you talk about maybe the evolution from where the roots of it began to today?
Sure. I mean, I think it can feel like it came out of nowhere, but it's really been on this growth trajectory for quite some time. And the space really started, but Amazon started it in 2012, right? So when we think about how fast everything has moved, it's been a long time coming, and so it sort of happened really slowly and really fast, and then all of a sudden, all at once, right? But it's been an interesting evolution in the space where retailers were finally sort of able to capitalize on their most critical asset, which was their data of the shoppers that they have. They know their people. Shoppers are habitual, so they're getting this repeat purchase. These people are coming in and out of their stores, shopping online, and they know so much about them. And to be able to use that to create impactful experiences that actually solve real world problems for consumers on behalf of brands is ultimately the holy grail. And from a media perspective, it just makes a lot of sense that dollars can go to things that are going to have immediate impact and actually solve consumer challenges. And consumers will part with their money when you solve a problem for them that, and meet a need. And there's really no entities that are better suited to deliver that kind of experience than a retailer itself, but they can only do that in partnership with brands.
You mentioned when Amazon kicked things off, the dollars were seemingly mostly coming out of what was like in-store or shopper marketing. It seems to have evolved. Can you kind of talk about how that's changed over time?
Yeah, I think initially it started as truly a revenue generating opportunity where retailers were sort of locked into trade spend, and so they were capped out at how much they could get from brands, and so being able to sell media became an alternate revenue stream. That was probably the initial intention, but the space has now evolved in for all the right reasons because consumer behavior has changed. And so consumers go online to retail platforms to research products, figure out what they need. In a lot of ways, especially in kind of the CPG space, retailer platforms become the new brand.com, Amazon becomes the new Google. And so if that's where consumers are going to learn about things, to discover things, the evolution of the experience becomes more upper funnel right out of the gate. And so you can no longer think of retail platforms as just the lower funnel point of purchase. It's the entire discovery process from inspiration to consideration, ultimately to purchase, and it's all happening in the same avenues. And so it's the use of those touch points that retailers have to offer to create that right best experience to deliver on that.
As this category has grown quickly, there's been different approaches in how to structure the buying. Like you've got the specialty agencies, the typical media departments, and then specialists like yourself. How have you figured out the right way to kind of funnel this and direct this in the way that works for your brands?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I kind of equate the retail media specialization landscape to the rise of digital 20 years ago, where all of a sudden you had to have all of these digital agencies that were hyper specialized in this kind of new world order, new capability. And that's where the retail media space is right now. I'm a firm believer that specialization drives growth right now because each of the platforms operate very differently. The funding models are different. The touch points are different. The way you have to buy and execute is vastly different across retailers. And unless you have that deep knowledge of the retailer and the space itself, it's increasingly difficult to be successful. Will that eventually become more ubiquitous and part of just the table stakes of business, much like digital did? You don't have digital agencies anymore. Yes, that will be the future. I would say we're at minimum at least 10 years out from that right now, though, and hyper-specialization is truly what will deliver for brands.
Typically, this category is thought of as very hardcore direct response driven, and often the creative is almost underappreciated or an afterthought, but you'd like to see that change.
I absolutely want to see that change. I think that's arguably the biggest mistake that anyone can make in the retail space activating right now, to think about it from just truly data-driven performance, immediate response. You're creating true customer experiences across an entirely vast ecosystems of retailer environments, third-party integrations, and a consumer is experiencing your brand in multiple ways across their entire path, and that experience has to be cohesive. It has to make sense to them. It has to solve their problem, but you have to engage with them in a way that's also inspiring. And so if that's where they're going, that's where they're living, that's where the creative execution that's going to get their attention, keep their attention, deliver brand promise, deliver brand loyalty and love happens in those spaces now. And it's a creative actually arguably becomes more important and more relevant than it's ever been. And the idea of commerce creative being the separate thing or a final last minute touch point is absolutely the wrong way to think about it. Instead, it's almost inverting the way that you approach creativity and thinking about if ultimately driving a great experience that delivers a purchase is your goal, how do you start there from a brand idea and build a brand and an activation all the way through that's going to deliver the results that you want.
Lastly, as 2024 gets going, are there things you'd like to see change this year? Would you like to see standardization and consolidation? What's in your list?
I would love to see the retail media networks get a little bit more consistent in their reporting structures. I think the access to the data is their most valuable asset, but I don't know that they necessarily capitalize on it to the best of their ability yet in the way that the reporting isn't consistent, it isn't frequent enough, quite frankly, and when you're in a retail environment, access to real-time data is what you have at your disposal, but you're not using that. And the more that you can see consistency and these retail platforms that quite frankly became accidental publishers overnight, right? And so they're now media outlets, but they don't really know how to do that. And in order to continue to grow and to capitalize on this moment, they're going to have to get more sophisticated in that capacity because the more that you can show results, the more that you can show data transparency to brands that in a way that they can understand it and appreciate it, it will only continue to unlock more dollars.